The hunting of Donald Trump. That's the focus of tonight's angle. Now, I remember when anti-Trump forces used to think that the DOJ should operate independently.
This is an abuse of power that the president is again trying to manipulate federal law enforcement to serve his political interests.
This may be the most serious Trump inappropriate DOJ meddling since the firing of Comey.
Is Trump using his government to punish his foes and help out his friends?
William Barr was happy to put DOJ into service as Donald Trump's not just political shield, but political weapon.
Of course, Barr did nothing of the sort. That was all a lie. But what a difference a few years make in Democrats' views of right and wrong. Now, Biden's attorney general is doing exactly what they all warned about under Trump. He's weaponizing the DOJ despite his denials. In perfect timing with the Washington Post article that was teeming with DOJ leaks about a criminal investigation surrounding January 6 and Trump, Garland sat down with NBC to stir the pot and drop more hints.
We pursue justice without fear or favor. We intend to hold anyone who was criminally responsible for the events surrounding January 6th, for any attempt to interfere with the lawful transfer of power from one administration to another, accountable. That's what we do. We don't pay any attention to other issues with respect to that.
All choreographed to drive the news cycle and to throw some red meat. There's no way he actually believes that President Trump was conspiring to overthrow the government. That is 100% ludicrous. It's unsupported by testimony offered at the January 6th Star Chamber.
I felt that Richard Nixon should have been charged. I felt Bill Clinton should have been charged. Those were easy cases. Those were very clear, straightforward crimes that I think could have resulted in rather quick convictions. That's not the current situation with Donald Trump.
Now, whatever your views on Trump in 2024, this Garland news should really disturb you. Bowing to the demands of Biden himself and anti-Trump forces in Congress, Garland's no better than the average, prosecutor working for Vladimir Putin. Political opponents are relentlessly hunted, prosecuted, then jailed by a sham Ministry of Justice there. And the New York Times does impressive exposés of Putin's vendetta-style justice. But they take the proffered justification for Garland's investigation, they take it all at face value. No concern about potential political bias or political motivations. I wonder why. Maybe we should ask Hunter Biden. A staggering lack of curiosity about his business conduct, even when his hard drive was verified. But it's worse than just a media cover-up. Senator Chuck Grassley just wrote Garland and the FBI Director Chris Wray about new whistleblower information that describes concerns in 2020 about the FBI's receipt and use of derogatory information related to Hunter Biden and the FBI's false portrayal of acquired evidence as disinformation.
It's as simple as opening a case against Trump that was based on fuzzy liberal newspaper reports. But when it come to Hunter Biden, with plenty of concrete information, it was shut down. It's pretty simple.
This investigation of Trump is a complete farce. Any charges that stem from this will be seen by honest legal observers for what they are: more political persecution, not legitimate prosecution. Now, remember what the New York Times reported last April, courtesy of confidential sources, that Biden wanted Trump prosecuted. He was growing tired of how he described Garland acting as a ponderous judge instead of a prosecutor. Now, those quotes were leaked for a reason: to influence Garland. Well, it took a while, but message received. Although Garland's hedged his bets a little bit, an investigation, but no prosecution yet. They seized John Eastman's cell phone, and now they're on a hunt and peck mission to find something, anything, to help develop some type of criminal case against the president or close confidants that don't really exist. Now, this, along with the January 6th committee, will cost the American taxpayers untold millions of dollars. It's going to drive countless hours of bad programming on MSNBC. In the end, it's going to accomplish nothing other than the further erosion of public confidence in the Department of Justice and, of course, of Congress.
They edited evidence to take out what might be mitigating material, even statements from Trump. That's not how you build a case. That's you might build ratings, but that's not how you build a case. Now, hopefully, the Justice Department is going at this more in a systemic, professional way, but we still don't see those critical linkages.
The Democrats and Liz Cheney simply cannot let go of January 6th. And the DOJ, they can't either. They can't brag on the economy or foreign policy. So what else are they going to do? And this new travesty that Joe Manchin, by the way, agreed to, vote for is not going to reduce inflation either. Not going to be able to brag about that. But of course, it's going to grow the government. In the end, the Democrats' entire message this campaign season revolves around two things: January 6th and abortion. What a depressing message. Plus, do you really think the Democrats are confident they can beat Trump if he's the nominee in 2024? Although it's very early, even after all the January 6th hype, Trump is winning in a head-to-head matchup against Biden. And at least for now, he's also ahead of all other potential candidates in the 2024 primary.
If I renounced my beliefs, if I agreed to stay silent, if I stayed at home and just took it easy, the persecution of Donald Trump would stop immediately. It would stop. But that's not what I will do. I can't do that. I have to save our country.
It's obvious to anyone who's honest with himself that our government has been plotting to destroy Donald Trump since the day he announced he was running for president. They relied on the fraudulent work product of corrupt sleazebags like Christopher Steele. They filed phony papers with the FISA court to spy on his campaign. Of course, they hounded him with a nearly 2-year-long Mueller investigation that was illegitimate from the outset, was stacked with partisans, and found no obstruction of justice in the end. In the words of Bill Barr, it was a grave injustice. And of course, the rabid anti-Trump forces on Capitol Hill, they dragged the man through 2 pointless impeachments. They did nothing but distract the White House and wasted time and resources. For what? And now the same anti-Trump media frenzy that led to so much false reporting during his presidency, they're thrilled about every leak.
Right now, it's a much more broader net that is trying to gather everything about Team Trump and piece together what potential crimes may have occurred, including, the most serious one, seditious conspiracy to obstruct a government proceeding.
A much more broader net. Yes, that's a journalist. Okay, a broader net. Every fishing expedition casts nets out, don't they? And Garland's, of course, no different. Now, you know how pathetic this entire investigation is when you realize that the same party that's okay with letting thugs who assault police officers go free, they think Trump should be charged for violence committed on January 6th.
The grand jury is actively investigating Trump's criminal conduct. The Justice Department is interested in two different kinds of crime. So one is the violence and blood that we associate with Insurrection Day. Crimes like conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to impede congressional investigations.
The conspiracy blather's not even worth responding to. It's inane. So why don't these nincompoop pundits just come out and say the truth? It would be liberating for them. Trump should be indicted because we can't beat him otherwise. And that's the angle.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.